Thank you very much. There's too many other interesting things to talk about. Now, as you appreciate, this is an amazing venue. And in the earlier session, I noticed that a lot of you were wandering across to the Sydney skyline, so I exhort you all to get focused. We have some very interesting presentations in the next session, including lifestyle issues, very important after a transplant. We have some perspectives of the journey, what a difficult journey it is for many. We have a couple of ex-patients and a mum. And lastly, we have our resident futurist, Scott, who's going to talk to us about the future of what's on the horizon for liver disease and liver transplant. Lifestyle issues. You probably noticed one of Albert's graphs of the survival of children versus adults. Adults don't seem to be doing too well. One of the big reasons why adults don't do that well is they develop lifestyle diseases, high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes. So it's a very common problem after transplant, and in some of our children we're actually seeing the early stages of that. And one of the best therapies for lifestyle diseases is improving your lifestyle. And towards that end, I'm very happy to introduce Harriet. Harriet Walker is a dietitian from Canberra. She has a master's degree in dietetics. Judging from her website, she's also a lifestyle guru, and it looks to me like she could be a bit of a beast in the gym as a personal trainer. So if any of you are game, get onto the website and sign up. But Harriet, because of these issues with lifestyle, I've been suggesting to some of the patients that they should run a marathon every morning before they go to school, but no one's taken my advice. So I'm looking for some sensible suggestions about lifestyle modifications. So Harriet, thank you.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you to Claire and everybody behind the organisation of today. It's a really big pleasure for me to be here and to be speaking, and also to be hearing all some amazing information from some really seasoned experts. Before I begin, I suppose I'll give you a little bit of information about myself and just to give a little bit of context about what I'm going to speak to today. I'm a dietitian. I work in private practice in Canberra. So I see a range of people from sort of weight loss to sort of more specialised areas, and I mainly work in sports nutrition. But so you can sort of see already that there's nothing to do with specific with liver treatment or the nutrition side of that for children or adults with liver disease. But what I'd like to talk to you today is more on the opposite side of the table and actually speaking to the parents and the carers of children with liver disease. I don't have that experience, that clinical experience, however, with the liver care, but I do have experience as a carer. I grew up with a sibling who had special needs, and growing up watching my parents and the impact that had on our family, especially with a lot of the attention and the care that my sibling needed. That taught me a lot. And then not so long ago, I've actually been a carer for a parent who needed care during a critical illness. So across that personal experience that I've had, and also in my professional experience, and I would say very quickly that experience in learning about self-care actually informed my career choice. I've built a pretty strong understanding and appreciation for the need for self-care and the role that nutrition plays into that. So over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to take a little bit of a closer look into some of the practical ways in which we can practice self-care through nutrition. And it's not all about Biggest Loser style or extreme dieting or anything like that that's on TV. Unfortunately, there's a really big trend in nutrition at the moment, and I have to say that I've been doing this for a lot longer than it was trendy. Having studied for about 6 years to gain my qualifications. But hopefully you can walk away from today's little session on nutrition with some practical applications. And even if you're not ready to sort of look at the practical side of it, maybe a little bit of food for thought, excuse the pun, in terms of how you might be able to look after yourself a little bit better. So the 3 topics I'll be covering today are applying your own oxygen first, and what that actually means and how to do it. The hospital survival guide. So these are a few little tricks that I picked up being back and forward from a hospital in my time, and also transitioning back home. So I haven't experienced, having a child with the liver disease. So these are sort of quite general, but I think they're applicable in a lot of different situations. And even if you aren't a parent or a carer, for the other people in the room, it is a good little time to brush up on self-care in general. So we will start off first with the self-care is not is a priority and a necessity. It's not a luxury. Very commonly people brush their own self-care under the rug, and it's quite easy to do, especially when in the early stages of finding out that your child is unwell. And it's very common for people to put themselves second, third, fourth, or on the back burner in order to look after it. And from an acute time, that's probably necessary to be able to adjust to new diagnoses and that sort of turbulence which some of our other speakers have talked about today. However, long term, we really need to be looking at how do we integrate our own self-care into our day-to-day lives, and with a new lifestyle, dealing with a child, dealing with the implications of it having an unwell child. So applying your own oxygen first. Diet isn't just about sort of calories in, calories out. It's about fueling your body to come up, to be able to meet the daily challenges that we face. What we eat really impacts our mood, and the more we go into the research in this area, it's becoming more and more apparent that there is a big connection between what's going on up here and what's going on down here. When we start looking at gut microbiome, which is a new sort of budding area of nutrition and medical research, we know that our gut health it greatly impacts our mood. This area of research is progressing, and as we find out more information, we'll realise that what we actually put in our mouth can actually impact our cognitive function and our mood. So being mindful of how we eat and how that impacts our headspace. From an immune perspective, if we're not looking after ourselves, we do put ourselves at risk of becoming unwell. I've seen some sort of research around carers, and I think some of our other professionals today, Dr. Bowen and Dr. Mackenzie, would probably know all too well that carers and parents are at a higher risk of having those lifestyle-related diseases. And if you're not well, you're not going to be able to look after your family, which means that we need to reverse this a little bit and put a little bit more, give yourself permission to look after yourself first, and then look after other people, which is why I use the analogy of applying your own oxygen first. And then there is the long-term health habits, and there's also an amount of role modelling that occurs. So how you treat yourself, your children are watching, and these are children who will need to take better care of themselves than most, and will probably be more mindful that they have those needs. So as we grow up, we've got parents who have the opportunity to actually establish some really good healthy habits for their family, and what I'll run through today is just some really, really basic and practical ways in which we can do this. So eating for health and well-being, and like I said, it's really important not to get caught up in too much detail when it comes to diet and exercise. There is a lot of extremism out there. And in most cases, it's unnecessary. There are definitely people who need to spend a lot more time on their diet because of health issues, and they're most likely working with a dietitian in the hospitals. And many of you will have had interactions with dietitians for the more specific needs for children with liver disease. But from a general perspective, we need to just be careful in looking at the quality of our food in general. So a lot of our food comes in packages these days, and generally speaking, if it's got a label on it, it's been processed in some ways, and they're the sort of foods that we want to kind of try and reduce, or even just sort of make a point of looking into more. Learning how to read labels is a really useful skill to have. Keeping your carbohydrates to be good quality ones. So we're looking at whole grains and unprocessed. So not your white floury breads and lovely morning teas. So it would be an opportunity to look at sometimes foods, but these are special occasions, and that's okay. It's very okay to have that sort of food in your life, and it's not a matter of cutting that all out. It's about finding a sustainable way of eating. But quality carbohydrates can help boost our mood. So there's a big push in some circles to reduce carbohydrates, but it is actually quite human to want to comfort eat, and we can make better choices when we want to comfort eat, and quality carbohydrates, unprocessed ones, are a really good start for that one. So keeping in mind, like cereals, they might be whole grain versions, breads going for the grainy, or the sourdoughs is another good way of looking at it. The starchy vegetables and vegetables in general are really good sources of carbohydrates to help us keep even. I'm not sure if anybody's experienced hangry, but that's just one thing where we're hungry and angry at the same time. And it doesn't help when we're in a hospital situation and we haven't had a chance to fuel ourselves properly. We're not giving ourselves the best chance to actually approach the situation with a level head. And I personally avoid hangry at all costs because I know I'm not going to be making the best decisions in that state. Next up, we're looking at protein. So protein comes from eggs, dairy foods, lean meats, nuts and seeds, and legumes. So these are the sorts of foods that are, again, mainly unprocessed. And it's all well and good for me to tell you to eat unprocessed foods when time is very poor, but I'll go through some strategies later on in the piece before we get too caught up in the detail. Protein is really important for a lot of different functions in our body, from muscle development to immune function to cellular development, for weight maintenance and for appetite modulation. So having your meals based around a good quality source of protein is really important. So I like to get my clients to picture their plate. One half of it will be vegetables, 1/4 of it will be a lean source of protein, and the other quarter will be a healthy serve of carbohydrates, and then there'll be some sort of healthy fat involved, like the olive oil or an avocado. So that plate model is a really easy way of just eyeballing your plate and going, am I doing this the right way? And then we've got the healthy fats that I mentioned. So these are looking at olive oils, nuts, seeds, avocados, small amounts of butter is okay. As long as we're keeping it in smaller portions, we'll be fine. But it also helps for the omega-3 fats, which come from oily fish, and the sea creatures are the really good sources of that. It really help cognitive function, and we're really looking at that aspect of food assisting in mood and mood development, and the way in which, if we're not getting enough of those omega-3s, that can actually impact within the big picture, can impact on our mood as well. So making sure that we're having those that balance in our diet is super important. And as I sort of referring back to the first point, is that whole foods thing, because we know that once food starts getting processed, we lose a lot of the goodness from it. So people, there's a big push in popular media around grains and whether or not they're actually acceptable in the diet, and there's food is neither good nor bad. It's really the damage is in the dose of what we're eating. And I work a lot with my clients around language with food, because calling a food evil is really giving it way too much importance. I think we need to be mindful of how we talk about food and keeping it light and keeping the conversation positive, because we don't want unnecessary anxiety around eating, and this will translate into children as they're growing up with an illness. There will be an emphasis on certain foods they should or should not have, and especially in the earlier months after a transplant, we're looking at avoiding foods that are sort of high-risk foods, similar to the ones that we avoid during pregnancy. And that what we want to do is try and create a relaxed environment around food. So the recommendation to keep it as whole foods is a really sort of a healthy approach, I feel, to talking about it. So other tips around applying your own oxygen include getting physical. So there's a lot of really great research around the benefits for mental health and for well-being on exercise, boosting those happy hormones. And it can be something as easy as going for a walk in the morning, making 10 minutes for yourself to get up and get active. Personally, I found exercise has gotten me through a lot of turmoil in my early 20s, experiencing illness within my family, and it's definitely something I turn to and I rely on as being a source of consistent sort of even mood, and especially when in times of trouble, I always turn to even the lightest of exercise. Moving more is a really important message. Staying hydrated. So hydration can really impact cognitive function as well, brain function, and how clearly we think. From a sports nutrition perspective, I preach this for athletes because a dehydration of just 2% of your body weight, which might be, for some people, 750 mils loss, can actually decrease cognitive function. If we translate this into the general population, very often we might start the day dehydrated, and it only gets worse if we're not thinking about it. There's some great apps out there that can remind you to hit your targets for hydration, but it's a really small way of actually making sure that we're looking after ourselves, and we want to be as clear as possible, especially when we're receiving information that can be quite critical in the hospital setting. So a little thing like dehydration, and then there's caffeine. I'm a mad coffee fiend, so I don't give this advice out lightly, but if caffeine does, some people are more sensitive to caffeine than others, so if it does make you jittery, especially during times when we're trying to process new information and are feeling a little bit vulnerable with new diagnoses, it's important just to keep in mind moderating caffeine intake. Taking a break and phoning a friend, so that self-care and that network that we've referred to earlier is really important, and we might not be able to have our family with us at all times, but really utilising the vast amounts of social media or apps and Skype and whatnot to be able to keep in contact. There's a lot of different ways we can do that, so it's really important to keep that connection where you can, and ask for help if you are feeling isolated. And that's another part of self-help, is being able to check in and ask yourself on a regular basis, am I okay? Do I need to seek help? And personally, it's one of the things that I cover in nutrition sessions is a lot of the time it's not about the food. So, comfort eating is a really big aspect, and it's not going to resolve itself until you resolve the underlying issue and the need for comfort eating in the first place. So it's definitely something that I look to discover in clients who I believe might be facing other issues other than their nutrition. So when it comes to hospital survival, this might be acute. You might only be there for a short amount of time, or there might be cases where it's longer term. And this sort of this advice ranges within that. It's a good idea to get an idea of what is in your general area. Most hospitals actually do have some sort of healthy eating traffic light system. It might not be apparent all the time, but there are always healthy options if you're looking for them. And that's the key. I hear from a lot of people that healthy eating is really hard to do and there's not enough access to healthy food choices, but actually these days it is getting a lot easier to make healthier choices, especially with the hospital sort of traffic light systems, local shops nearby. If you're committed to the idea and if it's something that you want to do and you can see the benefits from it, you will find a way. I generally speaking use petrol stations as a gauge to how society is going, and if I can get a protein shake and some sort of fermented superfood in a petrol station, I think we can all do a little. It's reflective of how much more progress we have in the way of availability of healthier options these days. Preparation is a really big one, and it might go into the plan that some of our other professionals were talking about today, is having a plan before you go in, and making healthy snacks a part of that for your child and for yourself, because as I said, that low blood sugar level that can happen, that brain fuzz, is avoidable with a little bit of preparation. It's as easy as making a few snacks in advance and having them in your handbag, in your backpack, ready to go. So if you do have to wait longer than you had anticipated and you've missed a meal, you're not going to be feeling that low blood sugar level, which can actually be mistaken for a bit of anxiety or can heighten that feeling if you already are experiencing it. So a little thing like having a few snacks on hand is really important. And then trying to keep to some sort of meal routine. So, hospital stays can be tricky, and it can be hard to sort of adjust to a new environment and different support networks day to day. However, if we can try and at least keep a routine of 3 meals a day and maybe a few snacks where you can, it can help. Routine is really important for any kind of health and well-being. We need, we thrive on routine as humans, and being able to try and keep that is important. A few other points. These are just some ideas for what you could look for that are regularly available. So things like plain yogurts, watching out for flavoured yogurts as they are packed with sugar. Fruit's a really good option. There's always fruit there if there's nothing else. Trail mixes, whole grain sandwiches with a protein source in there. So there's always going to be a good old egg sandwich wherever you go. May not be, blue sky perfect, but it's something that's better than nothing, and it's much better than the chocolate bar that inevitably comes if you're not prepared. So trail mixes and nut mixes are really great to make at home, and they're the ones, those frozen steam bags, which we can get from, are really available everywhere at convenience stores and whatnot, are a really good short-term solution. Like I said, we're not aiming for blue sky perfect diet. We're aiming for a practical approach in an acute situation. And things to watch out for, which are really common, is large portions of juice, because they can pack a punch from a sugar perspective. Commercial smoothies tend to be quite large and contain a lot of added sugar. Sugar's not the devil. However, if we're having them in large portions, we are going to feel the impact, especially if we're reducing our exercise or physical activity routine as well. Watching out for vending machines, and there is a big push at the moment amongst sort of health departments across the states to improve access to healthy food, and especially in vending machines. However, they are, generally speaking, giving very few healthy choices. So if we're at least mindful of what to watch out for, we can be looking out for changing our vision for more healthier choices. And when it comes to transitioning back home, again, it's going to be a time of, so just very quickly, we want to keep meals relaxed. We might have, feeding routines to kind of adhere to. We want to try and make sure that it's as relaxed as possible. So we are avoiding certain foods, but if the family can eat together, it's a good way of keeping it all together and having that bonding experience. We don't just eat for energy, we also eat to share experience and to talk, and it's where those little things come up over the discussion at the table that are really important. If you know that you're going to be busy, or ask help. If you can get some meals prepared, or you can buy some, it's actually a lot inexpensive to prepare meals in advance and take them with you. It's a great way of reducing that cost that can be associated when we are feeling sort of financial pressure. And then the 80-20 rule. So as I said before, we don't just eat for good health. We should be doing it, we should be aiming to do it 80% of the time. And that gives us a bit of lax time for when we are amongst friends and we are enjoying ourselves to be able to have those foods that actually are enjoyable for us but may not necessarily be adding to the health bucket. It's important to find that balance, and if we can eat well 80% of the time, we can afford to kind of relax and enjoy and share and show love with food, which is really important. And so that's going to be me wrapping up. So thank you very much for having me along today, and I hope there's some sort of practical bits in there that we can take away, or at least think further on how we might be able to use nutrition as a way of showing self-care. So thank you very much.